Chico and the Man will not be presented this evening, and the Rockford Files will be seen 1 hour later than normal, so that we may bring you the following special program.
Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners.
If you like comic books, then you definitely like comic art. Visit comicartfans.com to see original comic artworks and custom drawings that people have collected and posted online. Coming soon, Comic Art Fans is hosting an in-person event called the Original Art Expo that will focus on the hobby of collecting original comic art. The Original Art Expo will be held at the Doubletree by Hilton Hotel in Orlando, Florida on January 26th through the 28th, 2024. They will have over 30 exhibitors and 60 comic artists. Spend the weekend in an intimate setting with some of the best creators in the world. Purchase or commission a piece of original comic art. Visit the comic art and illustration galleries. Attend the Saturday night auction and pizza party and hang out with your fellow comic art enthusiasts. The Original Art Expo is sure to be the world's premier visual storytelling art event, so don't miss out. Go to oa-expo.com to get your tickets today and visit comicartfans.com to see what comic art collecting is all about.
Hi, I'm Alex Ross.
The two pieces are sort of a type. They're both kind of recreations of artwork that existed in the 90s. In fact, this piece here for the Avengers is in most ways a recreation or a tribute to George Perez's poster version from the mid-90s, where he did a shot that featured in it a figure of Captain America that was very similar to what I've done here, positioning of the Vision or positioning of Hawkeye, and I believe a few other elements are very similar to that piece, and it's consciously so. I was building off that inspiration, but I kind of refitted my design to fill out bigger shots of the figures so that I was making a wider composition and getting in a lot of the same characters, but still not quite as many as what George himself did, because George's thing was always to try and get in the maximum amount of content into pieces that he did.
Welcome back, everybody. It's time again for Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntra's here. You know, it's a solo show here at Word Balloon most of the time. But if there is someone that has been an occasional co-host, it's definitely Gabe Hardman, who joins us this evening to talk about a couple new comic book projects he's working on. Welcome back, my man.
Thank you for having me, John.
As always, I'm always happy to talk to you. For people who don't know, they should really go back and look at the Word Balloon library and our rewatch of The Outer Limits that we did, and our fun Kinescope show where we looked at early television, early live television. Those were a lot of fun. But, and our Scene Missings.
A bunch of movie review podcasts that we've done for, somewhat either terrible movies or obscure movies or sometimes great movies like Taking a Pelham 1, 2, 3.
Absolutely. I was telling Matt Singer last night that we did The Silent Partner.
Yeah.
And he perked up right away. He's like, "Oh yeah," he goes, "That's a great movie." So that was our most recent one. Yeah, we got to do a skull section and figure out what our next Scene Missing should be.
Absolutely.
So, not my name. Thank you, man. And he's watched them all. He says, so that's cool. I appreciate that. And as people are gathering, so Gabe, you're doing a thing that started in Batman Brave and Bold number 7. It came out a week or two ago.
It's like it came out last week. It's it's a 3-part serial, like 10 pages each, an Aquaman serial. It's a little bit of it's my kind of grounded superhero story, but with a little bit of a Silver Age inspired bent to it. And it involves some scary aliens under the sea, and eventually a bunch of gorillas, which is a thing that obviously I've I've dealt with guerrilla material before with Planet of the Apes and other places as well. But I've always, I don't know, I've always had a thing about wanting to do something with Gorilla City in DC, and I also just didn't want to approach the thing. I wanted to try an Aquaman story because Aquaman's kind of a challenge, like it's hard to figure Aquaman, I think. Also I wanted to draw fish, but I felt like I didn't want it to just, I wanted something that could, be a little bit more expansive about the world of, like in the DC universe and drawing in some different odd things. But the way we get into it is very, very much an Aquaman story.
Absolutely. No, I love it. And my goodness, here, I got to scroll down to grab it. Where the hell is it? There it is. Why we've stumbled into what we always love to do when gorillas or monkeys are in the conversation. It's time for another impromptu ape talk.
And look, do I just want to do a Gorilla City comic? Yes, I would. Like about the politics of Gorilla City, about the I do actually touch on this a little bit in the in the Aquaman story, but this is not going to happen. But and if it did, no one would buy it. I do really, I enjoy taking an animal who speaks very seriously. That's part of the fun of comics.
I imagine Gorilla City has a bicameral form of political structure, and
will they have? I feel like, at least as far as my story is concerned, they're going through some issues between younger and older generations, trying to reconcile some ideas that are at the core of who they are and how they think of themselves. And that's an element of my story.
Well, and also, forgive me, I hope I'm not spoiling, but I love this spaceman outfit.
Yeah, sure. It is part of the the tease and reveal of it, which is fine. The first chapter's out, and there's still 2 more, and there's quite a bit more to reveal.
Stepan Sejic joining us, and he goes, there's an entire successful series of movies about talking apes. If it was self-contained, I'd definitely read it.
Yeah, if look, we just need to tell Ben Abernathy about this. Tell everybody at DC Comics how much they just want this ongoing politics of Gorilla City book.
When it's done, how many pages is the story going to be?
It's 30, so it's like three 10-page chapters. But okay. I really enjoyed the part of the fun of this, and part of the reason I wanted to do it was the serialized part of it. I think that's like a really fun challenge in comics, and or anywhere. Ending something on a tease, ending on something with making people want to come back. Like, these are solid storytelling, kind of Charles Dickens type of things you do, right? And it's fun challenge, and I really enjoyed doing the book. I'd like to do more Aquaman stuff too. I do think he's a character who's kind of tough to do well. You can get mired in the below the sea politics. It can get, he can seem like a silly character among the other characters. And I'm sure, and I know there's a version of all that I would like to do, but for now, this is what I've got.
Dude, I'm telling you, no, you're killing it. It's beautiful. And I love, as I'm older, but back in the 60s when Jacques Cousteau was doing his ABC documentaries and stuff, and I'm sure we've talked about this before, underwater is just as compelling as outer space was.
Yeah.
And there were as many mysteries, and thank God the Odyssey was down there, photographing the undersea world, and it was really, really exciting and beautiful to see.
And when I was a little kid, I think one of the first books I remember owning was the Jacques Cousteau book, one of the books that had a lot of pictures, somewhat appropriate for a kid, but not a kid's book. and and I watched that stuff when I was little, and I'm super. I mean, I say I want to draw fish, but I'm very fascinated by all this stuff, and I do think that there's a lot of mystery and interest and intrigue about undersea stories, I mean, it's and trying to I liked I mean, obviously there's the Nick Cardy drew some cool Aquaman stories.
Oh my God, yes.
Arrow, in the past, but also there was an Aquaman miniseries I don't think anybody liked in the 80s by Neil Posner with I think Craig Hamilton maybe drew it.
I remember that one. Yep.
That's right. And I liked that at the time. I liked the kind of that it just felt different and fresh, maybe a little pre-crisis. I can't remember, but around the same time.
Yeah, I think you're right though. I think it was. I also liked, and I forget who the artist was. Was it was that the one that had the blue and white uniform, or was
that was the one with the blue and white uniform?
Okay, man, part of me, and especially in this toyetic environment that we're in, we're always looking for other reasons, and maybe Aquaman isn't popular enough. But I would say, hey, as opposed to the traditional, green and gold or green and orange, whatever. I think I guess more orange than gold. Yeah, man, that blue and white uniform I thought was really cool.
I mean, somebody could also design a new uniform for him. Everything doesn't have to come from 1985 and earlier, which. I don't think you'll see any evidence of that in my comic because basically I am still working with the DC universe now.
Well, and it's dark, and the right away, obviously people are abusing the water, and Aquaman is there to intervene.
Yeah, it's table setting, I mean, it's really just the fish is calling out to him, and this is what brings us into the story. The fish knows what's going on. It lets out.
I'm holding back on, and I don't know if you, I mean, I'm ready with an image, but if you want to, because it is still relatively just out, I don't know if you want to hold back as far as the main antagonist or not.
Oh, I mean, no. I mean, it's the Dominators. I mean, it's seemingly the main antagonist is the Dominators. The aliens. They were in the Invasion miniseries in the late '80s, and
yes.
I've actually tried to get Dominators into other DC stories in the past, other pitches and stuff. There was a pitch for a Metal Men book that didn't happen, that the previous publisher had asked for, and I was really trying to get a thing in there where Doc Magnus was in a romantic relationship with a female Dominator. I don't know why. No, people didn't get on board with this. I don't think Dan DiDio liked it, but I like it. It was in the context of a bunch of those alien races being involved. But I like I liked the fun perversity of it. Perhaps too much for DC Comics to handle.
Well, look at that design. I mean, look at these heads. Look at those fangs.
Sure.
I mean, my God, it's a great design.
Yeah.
I was really happy to see Brian Bendis kind of get as far as whatever the current, I guess, 21st century DC galactic picture is, that the Dominators were part of it and really treated beyond just bad guys. Like, okay, they're, like it or not, they're part of the galaxy. So
sure,
we have to make peace with them. And they were kind of involved in some big interplanetary politics and stuff. So no, I think that's great. And I'm psyched to see where you take the Dominators in this story. I know the next part comes out, I think, in that week between Christmas and New Year's. I'm pretty sure
that may be right. I mean, it is later in the month.
Yeah. And also, God, man, Brave and Bold right now, great anthology book. We got your series. We got Kyle Starks doing Wild Dog.
Yep.
Which is great to see.
Yep.
And I forget the fourth.
There's the Batman story is a lead story, and there's another Batman backup in the back of this issue.
It is another Batman backup.
Yeah,
yes.
but honestly, I don't know the lineup for the next couple of them necessarily.
Yeah.
I'm just doing my part and contributing. But
no, that's cool.
Yeah.
And I had Kyle on to talk about the Wild Dog story.
Yeah, he's got a big, like this, like a issue long, like a 20-something page, chapter in there. So
absolutely,
it's very cool. Yeah.
Oh, that's nice. Don Lenza checking in and says, "Love your conversations, guys. Gabe may make me an Aquaman fan." Ramona Fradon, of course, with that beautiful storybook.
Yeah.
Look to her Silver Age.
Yeah,
of course,
absolutely.
So, and I forget the original artist, Paul.
Actually,
shame on us.
Paul Norell or something like that, or no, that's not quite right. No, I have to look it up, but I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I also
Aquaman is a weird character because he's been around forever. I mean, he's one of the Golden Age characters, but and yet always a little bit on the sidelines. But I don't know. I like that. If I would have picked a more obscure character if I could have gotten away with pitching it like that.
Could have been the Sea Devils if you really thought about it. I suppose.
Sure. Hey, Bruno Premiani drew one issue of the Sea Devils. That makes it worth looking at.
Absolutely, man. No, I think it's great. I'm glad that DC is doing these anthologies, and I think really including yourself. I think everyone is up to the task of you can tell a lot of story in 10 pages.
Yeah, and I think there's the editor Ben Abernathy has assembled a really high quality group of people in this Brave and the Bold anthology. I mean, it's really high class stuff.
That's awesome, man. I know also, and I'm glad you sent me some images. You're working on a pretty neat noir comic strip idea.
Yeah. So I'm doing this. I'm basically doing a comic strip. Like it's gonna have a Sunday page like this. This is the first page of the strip, and then daily strips, like a single tier daily strip.
Stand by
the rest of the week, like this.
Yep.
And at least initially, I'm gonna have it on my Patreon. I haven't actually launched the Patreon yet. It'll be early next year, and I'll have that as a consistent, ongoing new comic strip. Eventually, I'll collect it somewhere, but that's going to be a ways down the road. And if you're subscribing to it, you're seeing this story develop. As I go, you're seeing the first draft of this story. And then on the Patreon, I'll also have storyboards. I'm a storyboard artist on movies. I'll have I'll just showcase some older storyboards, some older kind of movie oriented stuff, older comic stuff that people haven't seen before. A lot of things like that, as well as the new strip. The comic strip is like it's set in 1947. I've actually never really done as big. I mean, anybody who follows me to any extent knows how big a film noir nerd I am, and classic movies in general. But noir is my thing, and but I've never really done a crime story like that. I mean, I have my oddball Kinski book, and some things around the fringes of noir. But this is a full-on noir story set in the late 40s in Los Angeles. It involves the movie business, which I've worked in my whole adult life, but I'm also super fascinated with the history of. And it's about a publicity agent who so colossally fucks up a job, trying to cover up the death of a somewhat prominent actor, and ends up basically, loses his job, ends up at the bottom rung of show business until somebody comes back around and is like, there was more to what was going on with that actor, and you're the only one who actually, who could figure out how to investigate this. So it's a kind of amateur detective story. It's a detective who's in over his head, not a real detective, and very much a Hollywood noir story, but that'll bring in a lot of the different levels of Hollywood at the time, the poverty row stuff, the big glitzy stuff, the pornography, everything. It'll encompass the world of Hollywood in the late 40s.
So is your protagonist kind of like, was it Eddie Mannix, the fixer?
Well, it's like if it was Eddie Mannix's third assistant. He's not.
Yeah.
He's basically like the guy who showed up first for this problem, and and was unable to fix it, was unable to cover it up, and and I mean, basically, like the basic tenet of being a publicity agent, a publicist back then, is like, don't become the story yourself, and this guy becomes the story and loses everything over it.
Okay. And, for people, the uninitiated, studios had basically security guys working for them, and got from actors running over people. And
allegedly Clark Gable. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
The Loretta Young pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
Is certainly another one of those, and covered in the movie Everybody Hail Caesar.
Exactly. That's the something about the real fixer. My guy is a low-level publicity agent at the studio who gets in way over his head.
No, that's great, and I'm glad that not only the big studios but Poverty Row, all that stuff. I'm fascinated by. You know what I found, Gabe? And I don't know if you've seen it. I think it was from either the very late 80s or the early 90s. It was made for the BBC. It was a multi-part RKO story that Ed Asner narrated, of all people.
Interesting.
And it was really, really interesting. And I never knew the granular history of RKO, from Joe Kennedy being one of the founders to the people that bought the company from Howard Hughes, and ultimately sold the studio itself to Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz.
Yeah.
Great.
There's a lot of interesting stuff in there. I mean, Dory Sherry was, who was, thought of as a kind of progressive, film executive and producer, and then ended up going to MGM and being one of the movies.
He kind of
exactly
that post of the golden age of Hollywood, that late 40s, early 50s period was the Dory Sherry period. It's funny, I literally this weekend Turner ran his 1960 movie Sunrise at Campobello about Roosevelt. All fiction, but fun.
Right.
Watch. Cronin is really great in it. Bellamy is really great in it. Yeah.
And RKO is kind of, in a lot of ways, the Noir studio. I mean, Out of the Past and all these movies, but it's Noir came out of a certain, it was. I mean, they were really crime melodramas. There was no such thing as noir at the time. Nobody thought of it that way. But they were, they were, for the most part, smaller movies. There were A noir movies, as opposed to B movies. They weren't all B movies, but definitely RKO was making movies on a smaller budget than the bigger studios. RKO physically was just like a little part of what's now the Paramount lot.
Right.
If you're on Melrose Avenue, driving by the Paramount lot at the south west corner, you can still see the globe on the corner at the top of the building. That would have had if you look at the RKO logo at the beginning of all the movies, it's like a globe with a radio tower on top of it, because it was Radio Keith Orpheum, I believe, was the name of the what RKO comes from. And it and like you still have the globe, but no little tower.
Radio tower, yeah. No, it's a really interesting studio and a really interesting history. Couple comments from the Peanut Gallery right away. Ray Dillon just saying hello, and always enjoys your work, Gabe.
Hello, Ray. Thank you.
And then Mike wants to know, and we all do, and we really almost get a tease of what you could do in a science fiction setting in this Aquaman story. I'll show the spaceman suit again. But Mike's wondering, is there a chance we might see a volume 3 of Earth 1 Green Lantern?
I think it's not a very good chance of that. It was going to happen at a certain point, like 2 years ago, and for reasons outside of anybody's control, it didn't. That said, I would certainly be. If if circumstances worked out, I would certainly be willing to go back and do it if it were just because there's so much appeal in having a big giant book that's that and finishing the story. I mean, it's something that is that hurts me to not finish, but the circumstances when it was greenlit it was just impossible to do at the time.
I understand, and that happens sometimes where there's a publishing initiative, and all of a sudden, plans in the big picture change, and that happens sometimes. It's a shame because it really was, and I'm not just saying this because we're friends and because I appreciate your work, but really, it was one of the exceptional Earth One books.
I agree. I certainly put a lot into it, and it's a book that means a lot to me. And the fact that it's not done is not something that I'm thrilled about, certainly. But it's not DC Comics' fault. It's not, it's just something that worked out that way.
I understand. No problem. Man, I'm trying to think. And we mentioned RKO when it comes to Noir, but I've really enjoyed discovering the MGM noirs that are, kind of out there in the periphery. And and I can't think of my favorite, and this is Mystery Street.
Ricardo Montalban. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, there she is. How are you, buddy?
Look, it's Zeta.
I love Zeta. Yeah. Yay. Look at her. Very regal looking.
Completely ignoring you, though.
That's all right.
Doesn't care.
That's okay. I don't know.
I mean, I don't even have certainly Out of the Past isn't like just one of my favorite noirs. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. But I don't even think I have a way of really, saying what my favorites are. I'm like so entrenched in that world. Like my first experience with, really like my first noir experience was seeing them in a theater on 35 millimeter at Film Forum when I was like 17 years old in New York City. And it was, that was huge for me. I still think about it all the time. I still remember every one of them I saw. My friend Lucas and I went to 2 movies at Film Forum, and then another theater was having a noir festival at the same time. We'd end up going to 4 movies a day. It was early 90s New York. It was great, back when revival theaters existed and everything.
We're lucky in Chicago. We still have the Music Box, and I told you back in September, Eddie Muller was in town with the Noir City Festival, and I watched a great double feature, and one was Call Northside 777, the Jimmy Stewart great film, and then also, and I can't remember the title of it right now, but it was Ida Lupino and Richard Widmark.
Oh, Roadhouse.
It was Roadhouse.
Yeah, it is. It's called Roadhouse. It's not the Patrick Swayze Roadhouse, and it's not. They're not connected in any way.
Not at all.
Richard Widmark doesn't know anything about philosophy or martial arts in that movie. It's a really good movie. I think that's actually kind of an A picture noir. Like it's a bigger budget movie. It's not Detour or something.
Right. And that noir, that arc. Everybody really this YouTube. You can find it's called the RKO Story, and my God, thank God they got to some of these actors and actresses the obvious ones like Mitchum and Jane Russell, but Janet Greer is interviewed, and some of these other great femme fatales from that 40s and 50s period. And not only do they talk about their movies, but of course the weirdness when Howard Hughes owned the studio.
Yeah,
and Casting Couch times 10. And a lot of those stories, and a lot of the women that were married and still propositioned by Hughes and things.
Absolutely, and and I imagine just his erratic behavior, like the changes he would always want, the reshoots, the reworking everything pointlessly. He sounds like a nightmare. Everything about him sounds like a nightmare to work with.
All right, I'm trying to get this guy's. It's Synchro Shadow Advanced. Asks Gabe, I gotta ask, what's the deal with Aquaman not having an ongoing right now? I don't know if Gabe can answer that.
I have no idea. It's really just a publishing question. It probably has something to do with sales, and also just these characters can only sustain a book for certain periods of time, and then you give them a rest and want to bring them back. And that's sound publishing. Certainly Green Arrow has been through that kind of thing quite a bit. Has a title for a while, goes away, comes back.
Yeah, all the second tier Justice League members, and I kind of I understand that. I'm really glad Jeff Lemire did a Ray Palmer Adams story like 10 years ago or close to it, and it's like, yeah, maybe there isn't enough to sustain an ongoing, but that's why I think these anthologies are good, and certainly, obviously, good timing, a couple weeks away from Aquaman 2. Sure. So at least we do have a fresh story from Gabe that's coming out, and yeah, man, it's good. So, whatever.
I mean, I think that it's certainly a bit of a misconception that that those movies will somehow help the books, though. I think that they don't, and I think that's been pretty well proven over time. But certainly, if people are excited about Aquaman, then by all means, read my story.
Caesar of Rome. I know I can answer this story, but I'll let Gabe do it. Why is Aquaman in a Batman book?
It's an anthology book. I mean, it's an anthology book like like there have been anthology books all throughout comics history where, there's a lead story and then there are other stories in it. I mean, that's the beginnings of DC Comics. I mean, all of those books, Detective Comics and, and action. I mean, they were, they had a lead story and then they would have other backups. Like if anything, it's the most like kind of basic thing of comics. It's just not, those kind of books are not necessarily supported as much now, but there are great. I mean, to me, that's something I would seek out, right? Like, to me, I want something where I can see, different creators with fresh takes on things that have the room to tell a story that they're excited about, as opposed to just, the only option being a kind of monthly grind comic that, I think it's that kind of thing is exciting.
I completely agree. And I agree. And Ken Dog is right that also Aquaman has been in many Brave and Bold comics. And prior to Batman being the lead in Brave and Bold, it was just, God, one of my favorites was, I think it was in Brave and Bold, Dr. Fate and Hourman back in the 60s.
That may be, but it's certainly Brave and Bold was where, Teen Titans started in Brave and the Bold.
Right.
Drawn by Bruno Premiani. How many times can I say Bruno Premiani in one?
He's your guy. I totally.
Brave and the Bold launched several series, right? I'm not wrong about that, right?
Oh, 100%. I want, and possibly even Justice League, because I know that was in an anthology book before.
Yeah, no, I believe it was. I think Justice League did start it as well. Yeah, of course it did. Yeah, and I mean that's people know of it as something that is a team up for Batman, probably just as much because of the cartoon now as the the series from the past. But
certainly modern
for
audience.
A long time it was a Batman team up book. But I think that the Batman team up book ended before I started reading comics. Like it was a long time ago. I mean, I know there've been other ones since, but like that main run of it was over in the early 80s. I think it became Batman and the Outsiders, basically, on the publisher.
I believe that is correct. And God, I always love pointing out that in the 70s, and this is Bob Haney time, and Bob Haney didn't care about continuity at all.
Yeah,
and,
even though, me too. I'm the Bob Haney of comics. I'm joking.
You're not the Bob.
I'm a little bit joking.
But no, I remember. Oh no, and now it's out of my brain. What was I going to say about Brave and Bold? In the 70s, Batman would team up with Wildcat, and of course, Wildcat is on Earth 2 back then.
Yes, but he didn't. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So it was. I mean, that was my introduction to Wildcat and being a boxing fan. I was like, "Oh, that's cool, man! There's a superhero boxer, fantastic."
Right. But yeah, I remember that. That's maybe Nick Cardy, maybe.
No, it was Jim Aparo. Jim Aparo.
Okay.
But man, no, goddamn, I am always looking for Nick Cardy comics and stuff, because both the interiors and those covers were just so spectacular.
He did great covers. He did, great
Aquaman.
interiors. I'm 1 year at either New York or San Diego. He was there, older guy. And I went up and he had like a book of his work, and I bought a copy of it. And I was, I was a comics professional, but and he was like, "Oh, do you know my work?" And I'm like, "Geez, look, come on!" Like, yeah, I'm here to buy your book because I'm a fan, right? It's just funny that like somebody that I think of as being like one of the greats, he goes to this Comic-Con and it's a different deal.
There's a great story about Jim Aparo at San Diego like that, where in his later years he came. I think it was the 90s. It might have even been the early 2000s, but he was so shocked at how beloved his work was, he started crying, and it was like, wow, man, and I get it because these guys are hunched over the drafting boards and stuff, and
especially guys of that generation that just weren't connected with fandom the way that the next generation was. The next generation who would go to cons and John Burns or whoever go there and treat fans poorly or whatever they do. They're different. They're part of that world, and those older guys weren't part of that world necessarily.
No. Mitch Halleck saying hello from Terrificon.
Oh, hello, Mitch.
Good to see you, Mitch. And Synchro Shadow Advanced says, I have a recommendation for the both of you. Ryan Pohl wrote a book dissecting Aquaman in the modern age. I can't recall the name, but it was definitely Ryan Pohl. I have it somewhere. Well, that's cool, man. Oh, cool. And I appreciate that. Another callback, Gabe. And I'm sorry, but I know this comes up, and it's just because so many of us loved it so much. Ryan wants to know, I just joined. Any plans to go back to Invisible Republic?
I think that unlike the Green Lantern book, Invisible Republic will never be finished at this point. Like, it's a bad deal. It's certainly, I would say that's as catastrophic a thing for my personal feelings about my career, it's I'm not piling on or anything. I mean, it's a completely legitimate question to ask, but it's something that comes up all the time, but it's also like kind of a deeply wounding thing for me. Like, it really hurts, but it hurt not because somebody asked. That's fine. It's, by all means ask. It means somebody's interested. But it is something that it's not like it's not getting done for, there was further work done on Invisible Republic. It's, and I'll put some of that on my Patreon for people to see the finished pages that exist. But otherwise, that was a collaboration with my ex-wife, and we're not going to work together anymore. So it's not going to happen.
Sure, I understand. And then there's
the Green Lantern book was less of a collaboration, and much less. And so, that's something that I would be willing to go back to.
Well, Maud is another Earth One Green Lantern fan, so that's cool.
Oh,
Thanks for joining us, Maud. I don't recall seeing you on a Word Balloon chat before, so thank you for joining. I hope you'll hit the like and welcome indeed. Absolutely. Well, Gabe, thank God the strikes are over. And
it's still, the strikes are over, but somehow it's still December in Hollywood, which means no one works. There are things that are scrambling to get into production and stuff, but still not a lot of stuff is going on. But I am I'm happy that the strikes are over. My other career is in films, and and it's nice to work, especially after 7 months.
I hear you, man. That's nice. Ken Doug says, I love the Red Hulk run. Awesome.
Cool. Yeah.
And Chris has a question regarding the Noir strip. Below the Line is the title.
It is.
He wonders if there are any specific comic strip inspirations you're drawing from. Also, he hopes there are originals of your work and it's not all digital.
It is not all digital. It's done traditionally, all traditionally. So, I'm not being a Luddite. I just felt like this is, I'd like to draw traditionally and I like texture and all that sort of stuff, but I was very much inspired by reading, collections of strips and the very unique form of it. And definitely Rip Kirby.
I was going to say, absolutely,
Rip Kirby,
yeah.
But even if it's not quite as direct, I've recently been rereading Terry and the Pirates. I've been, and actually several other, just immersing myself in that world of strips, it's a very different form. Like and it's a really interesting form. And putting it on Patreon where everything is available, it makes it, it's even a slightly different form, because I don't think that you need to recap in quite the way that you needed to in a newspaper. But, and I tend to tell the story in a little bit more direct way. But but I really love playing with that form. But it's also modular, like it's drawn on a grid. So I can reformat these pages in different ways in the future for print. And,
Sure.
it's, I don't know. I mean, I was just really inspired by a lot of that stuff that I read. And although, let me tell you, the actual origin story of doing this thing as a comic strip was I bought a pad of pre-lined comic strip paper at Blick like 3 years ago, and it's just been sitting there in my studio forever. I still have never used it. I'm not drawing it on that, but like just the idea of just like something in that format, something that, telling a story that different way, it was something that was nagging me for a long time. And when I actually sat down to do it, it's like, oh, well, this thing's too small, and I draw them enormous, right? Because I have strips hung up in my studio on my wall as well, like another big inspiration. I have a Scorchy Smith Noel Sickles strip. I have one from actually there's one from this guy Ken Bald that I really like. It's nobody knows who he was or anything, but I have Frank Robb. No, not a Frank Robb. I'm sorry. I don't know why I'm blanking, but I have several of them. The Frank Robbins is not on the wall, so sorry, I didn't want to lie.
Okay, but you own Frank Robbins? I
have Frank Robbins and some lace, and I have but I have a bunch of different stuff. I mean, I have I have a bunch, but those up on the wall. Also, I have a Robert Fawcett original that's on the wall. That's not a strip, but as far as the aesthetic of this, it's very very influential. And like those strips are really interesting and exciting, and especially after being immersed in the world of comics. Yes, the Frank Thorne is the one that is one that was a big Frank Thorne strip that is a big influence on just visually on the style of this. That Frank Thorne strip, which is from a strip called Dr. Bennett or something like that, or Dr. Bennett MD or something. It's not collected. I would love to see it. I'd love a collection of it, because like there's something about like his style at the time. He goes into this more kind of line work oriented style later, and the stuff that you'd recognize from Red Sonja or later stuff. But this is very textural and dark and stuff. And I'd never even heard of the strip. I found the original art for that strip at a con, and was just like, this speaks to me. This is what I'm doing, And so years ago, and but that's hanging on my wall as well. That's certainly a big influence. I just think there's something really exciting about that form, and looking at comics in a very different way than as a contained graphic novel or as a monthly comic.
Man, I'm telling you, ever since the 80s, when companies like Radio Comics started reprinting strips, I've been fascinated. I'm so glad that companies like Hermes Press and IDW have done these beautiful collections of strips. Chris also says, as am I, I'm a huge Johnny Hazard fan myself.
Johnny Hazard is great. Yeah.
Frank Robbins, absolutely, man. And that's the thing. It's so it's this great kind of all of a sudden look back and realize, oh, that guy that did the Invaders, well, he was even bigger when he was doing strips. And
I mean, I obviously people like the 70s stuff that he did for the Invaders or Batman stuff and everything. And I think a couple issues of The Shadow, maybe. the 70s Shadow book.
Yes, he did.
And,
he absolutely did.
But
Yes.
the where he shines is those comic strips.
Yeah.
Like, that's his form. And and for so many of those people, not only was that their form, that was the much more important form of comics, at the time. Not just for money, but for people to access.
Oh, and you're right.
Regular people saw it,
Yes, yes.
and like it was part of the discourse.
But it was the comic books were kind of like they were the slumming, as opposed to having a syndicated strip and having that national, if not worldwide, audience and everything. No, I think you're right. And also, then you get the stories, and it's like, oh, did you know that? God damn it! Not seriously, man. I should never do drugs before doing a podcast. I'm kidding.
Sure.
Saturday Evening Post. Rockwell's nephew, assisted. I want to say, what's his face on Terry and the Pirates? John Rockwell.
Milton Caniff.
Yeah, thank you. Exactly.
I thought maybe you meant a letter guy, but absolutely. And I know Frazetta took over Al Cap and Little Abner for a while. You always have those stories, and I just think that but we have a little bit of a skewed idea of these things, that they're comic books, and certainly the superhero stuff is so much what we were all raised on, that certainly by the time I was a kid, that was by far the last days of the prominence of those kind of strips. But just the fact that they were in the paper and there was something that regular people could interact with, and it's not like you could certainly pick up comics off the newsstand, but it wasn't something that everybody, you're not necessarily going out of your way to do it. You have the newspaper right there.
Right. Everybody read the newspaper every day, 7 days a week.
And I also want to say, as far as comic strips go, this new Flash Gordon strip, have you read this? Have you not read this?
I have not read this. Please tell me.
This guy, Dan, whose last name I'm not remembering, because I apologize, but it's a new the new Flash Gordon strip that is seek it out. It's great. It's really embracing the form and super fun. And it totally worth your while. I'm just recommending it.
Is it in a comic book? And
no, it's a strip. It's on. You can get it online. Just just look it up. You'll find it.
I had no idea there were new strips. I know.
No, it just started in the last 2 months, and it's been awesome. I've been following it. You'll love it. You check it out.
Oh yeah, man. No, and I was gonna say, mentioning. Chris says it's Dan Schkady or Schkady. I'm not sure, but
I don't know how to pronounce his name, but that's correct. And and so look up his thing.
And it's on the King Features website. If folks haven't tried this before, it's very reasonably priced for a subscription, and essentially you can pick your own strips and kind of customize your daily and Sunday comic strip feed every day, and it's great. And they have modern strips and they have retro strips. And as you know, Gabe, I'm a big boxing fan, and there was John Cullen Murphy's Big Ben Bolt.
Yeah, and actually that's one of the things that I went back and read for this book. Also.
Oh wow.
Stuff.
Yeah, that's great. And Terry Beatty has been doing Rex Mason for the last few years.
Oh, interesting.
And I've had him on Word Balloon to talk about that. And again, now I'm blanking on who's doing Gil Thorpe. That's a friend of mine and is writing the strip.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's I do. I'm glad that adventure strips persist, and that King Features was very smart to give it that digital opportunity. And then also the Tribune syndication company, they have Go Comics, and they have a similar subscription. And again, you can kind of design your own page. I didn't know that, Chris. Chris says Mike Manley's on the Phantom. That's great.
That's correct. Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, I've seen those as well.
Yeah, man. And Mark Schultz and Jesus, I am not remembering. I've got to look over here. God damn it, I can't think of the artist's name right now.
Gary Gianni.
Thank you, buddy. Prince Valiant. That's why I need Gabe every now and then. Absolutely, man. So, that's interesting.
And Tom Yates now. Yeah, I think that's right.
Tom Yates, absolutely. Yeah. Chris says, I have a big collection of Robbins originals, and when I look at them, I'm constantly amazed that he managed a daily and a Sunday of Hazard for over 30 years. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Also, you got to have assistants back then.
That's true.
Comic book artists can't afford assistants for the most part.
That's very true. Absolutely. Mike Cooper. Oh, this is nice. Thank you, Mike. He wants to thank us both for the Outer Limits rewatch we did. Really meant a lot to me. I learned so much. Excited about your Patreon, Gabe. You're a great storyteller. Very nice.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And I certainly had fun with that Outer Limits, rewatch. That was. I'm a huge fan of that show. It was so fun.
Well, and it's, again, a lot of times if you don't watch it, you can dismiss it as, well, I've seen the Twilight Zone. I'm sure it's the same. It wasn't.
Yeah.
In the best ways, it wasn't. And who's the cinematographer that Conrad
Hall, who went on to be won multiple Oscars and went on to be one of the great cinematographers. He, him and his camera assistant was William Fraker, who, shot The Exorcist or whatever. And, it was exciting because these people were like getting their shot at stuff. And particularly the episodes written by Joseph Stefano, very Baroque and crazy and interesting, and it's the thing that it does very differently than the Twilight Zone is just have a kind of different identity to it. There may have been two identities to the Outer Limits, because there was the kind of Leslie Stevens more sci-fi stuff, and then there's the Stefano kind of Baroque sort of Gothic stuff. But all of it is really interesting, and all of it's very different from the Twilight Zone.
100%, man. No, it's one of the great early 60s shows. I haven't really investigated Thriller, the Boris Karloff.
The Karloff show. Yeah, that was one of those things that there was kind of an early DVD set of, and I remember watching it 20 years ago, or at least watching some episodes of it 20 years ago. I don't know how it would stand up now, but I don't know if the Thriller rewatch is a thing that the world needs or not. But I don't know. You know what I've been rewatching though?
Tell me.
Samuel Fuller movies.
Excellent.
Do we know Sam Fuller? So
sure.
Tell
the kids though. Yeah. Tell them about
he was kind of, a sort of. He had started as a newspaper man. He made these kind of hard-hitting movies, they would always have some, big, serious conflict in them. And they, and he had this way of making them very impactful. And I watched, for Noirvember, I watched this movie of his called The Naked Kiss that people might know from, it's one of those movies like Martin Scorsese, references and recommends a lot, but it's about a prostitute who tries to get away from that into a small town, and but it has this very famous opening where with no prelude, the beginning of the movie is her beating the shit out of her pimp. And then he reaches up and grabs her and pulls her wig off, and she's completely bald. And it's the most striking opening. It's the movie goes in directions you couldn't imagine. And I was just really inspired by how he was willing to take big risks on tonal shifts, take big risks on the kind of characters he tells stories about, and I was just inspired by that to go back and because I feel like one thing in the world right now that I don't love in storytelling and stuff is how tonally samey everything is. You're not really allowed to take big tonal shift risks and stuff. It's not fashionable. And so I was just inspired to go back and watch a bunch of Sam Fuller because of that, because he was the guy who did that kind of stuff really well. And I've watched 11 of the movies so far. And actually the first one, the first three are on Criterion Channel if anybody has it. And I It's I Shot Jesse James, Baron of Arizona, and The Steel Helmet. Baron of Arizona is fun. It has Vincent Price in it, but like I highly recommend I Shot Jesse James. Very interesting movie. You know, it's early directing for Sam Fuller. It's a little the directing's a little clunky, but it's got such a great script. It's about the guy who shot him. It's about the guy who shot Jesse James. He's Robert Ford. You know, and he's like a coward. You know, and he has to deal with it and the fallout of it and everything. It's like the opposite of what you think a legitimate like Hollywood movie would be about at the time, which has to be about a hero or whatever. And
sure,
nothing like that. You know, and he was always willing to tell these stories about marginalized people in tough situations, always with like, particularly even in his war movies and stuff, always with multiracial casts and like, and bringing a kind of hard-hitting progressiveness to stuff that's kind of refreshing to watch these days.
Oh, absolutely, man. No, and again, that's what you got from these Poverty Row studios, and
and these were like the best of his movies are like the independent movies, totally, like the ones where they're making him independently. He clearly doesn't have enough time or money, but he's got a great script, and then he makes a string of like movies for Fox, and they're more boring. Like there's the submarine one with Richard Widmark. The title's escaping me.
Is that Below or
Hell and High Water? Hell and High Water.
Wow.
Okay. And look, there's good stuff about the movie, but it's an assignment, like Daryl Zanuck wanted him to do it. Apparently, the previous movie he'd made was Pick Up on South Street, and it had to do with like low-level criminals in New York City. Like a pickpocket accidentally steals some plans that a communist agent is trying to like smuggle, and and there was some pushback from from the FBI or something, like where they didn't want it released. Daryl Zanuck stood up to him, and so Fuller appreciated that and took this assignment of the Richard Widmark submarine movie. But man, it just that and the next. Sorry, I've made it the Sam Fuller podcast, but I love and the follow-up movie House of Bamboo is great in a lot of ways, but it's shot in Japan in the mid 50s. It's all location work. Robert Ryan and Robert Stack are in it, and it's a good movie. But it doesn't have like that kind of grab you by the lapels, punch in the face Sam Fuller thing that that the studio kind of like sands off those edges.
That's what they say about Val Lewton. Once he got promoted from his low budget Cat People, Walk the Zombie movies, and you gave him a big budget and stuff, his vision kind of got lost.
Well, it gets subsumed by a big machine, I mean, the Val Lewton movies, they were their own little unit, and they got to do basically, as long as they only spent a certain amount of money, they got to basically do whatever they wanted. And that's often those are where the most interesting movies are.
Completely agree. Michael Cooper lets us know that I Shot Jesse James is right here on YouTube. And he says, I always get great recommendations of things to watch when you guys get together. Hey, man, this is truly, as do I. And that's why I love talking to Chaikin. Chaikin always is like that with his book and film recommendations. Synchro Shadow Advanced says, and I would agree as far as a modern example, Fruitville Station was an interesting protagonist.
Totally, yeah.
Right?
I'm not saying there aren't interesting movies out there. I'm just saying, like, it's just a. I do think that, like, there's some big risks. It's some like people are pretty risk averse these days in movies, and like I just like watching some stuff where somebody was really going for it, even if it all doesn't hold up these days.
I still haven't seen Nightmare Alley. Guillermo del Toro's version. Have you? If you did, what'd you think of it?
It didn't work for me in any way like the original one does, or the Tyrone Power one does. But that's also like one of my favorite noirs. And I've probably said this on some other Word Balloon show, but like I saw it I saw a nitrate print of it at the Egyptian in Hollywood before the pandemic, and literally one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. Like, I mean, if you don't know, there were, early days, they used to, print on nitrate stock, which was flammable. So like, it was not an archival situation. Sometimes it would burst into flames. So but the quality of those prints is incredible, right? And it just, it's not something that it just sounds like, oh, it's sure, maybe it's a slightly different quality of movie, where it's just a beautiful experience if you ever have the chance, and you won't, right? Like to see like a nitrate print someplace, but you never know, maybe you will. The Egyptian in Hollywood has just reopened. Like they renovated it. Great. Netflix owns it, so the Cinematheque can only screen stuff there a certain amount of time. But I went there and saw West Side Story and the Jacques. They had a 70 millimeter film festival. So like I saw West Side Story and I saw Playtime, the Jacques Tati movie.
Oh, fantastic!
And like it is a great experience to see stuff. And I mean, I was complaining before about how there weren't revival theaters as much, but LA actually has several of them right now, and it's more or less the only reason I haven't moved away.
I so understand, and again, thank God for the Music Box here. And there used to be the 3 Penny and the Parkway and the Varsity alongside Music Box, and they've also had 70 millimeter festivals as well. And like we were saying earlier, man, that's why I try every year when Eddie Muller brings his Noir Festival to the Music Box and stuff. I always go, because there's something about seeing these movies on the big screen. And Roadhouse was such a revelation. Although that said, I am glad that some of these orphan movies are on YouTube. I know in our earlier Seen Missing episodes with Hillary Barta, who is very much a purist, and I respect that. But it's like, hey, man, if you're in bumblefuck and, this is your only chance to watch I Shot Jesse James is on YouTube, great. At least you get it.
Totally.
So,
or subscribe to Criterion Show.
And better.
But like, just because you'll probably get a better version of it. But like,
that's true.
But no, if I can't find something anyplace else, I'll watch it on YouTube. I want to see this stuff, I mean, I used to go rent garbage like bootlegs from Eddie Brandt in North Hollywood, which was like it was like one of the oldest video stores. It's not there anymore, but like they used to have a thing where they had an enormous library, and this is slightly pre-internet, or at least before we were.
Oh no, absolutely, man.
Stuff down, and they just had a whole section that was you would get them for free if you rented something legitimate, and then you could ask for the bootleg of Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry, or whatever.
Absolutely. I went to Eddie Brandt's in North Hollywood back in 1982, and I filled 2 photo albums with 8x10s, just stock. Classic 8x10s of classic films, and a lot of it was. I mean,
supposedly, at least back then, they basically told everybody who would go in there that Steven Spielberg got reference materials for Raiders from Eddie Brandt to review for inspiration for that movie. It had been around for a long time.
It was a great store, man. It's stores like that it's a shame that they aren't around anymore, because they really were kind of these little paradise things that you wouldn't necessarily think you'd find treasure.
But there is there's a video store like 5 minutes from me, Videotech in Highland Park now. They moved from South Pasadena to Highland Park.
Okay.
I rented half the Sam Fuller movies I'm talking about from there that were not available streaming anyplace, or I didn't have copies of personally. So like it's I guess there are good things about Los Angeles. I don't want to admit it, but it's true.
There you go. Yes, and I agree with Synchro Shadow Advance saying physical ownership of movies, TV shows, books, whatnot. Best way to own media. Of course it is. Absolutely.
Because it doesn't just vanish. It's not, like it's sitting right there. You can put it in and watch it whenever you want.
You know, talking to Matt Singer last night, and I want to let people know if you didn't hear it, it was great. We talked about his new book about Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert, and I wonder, Gabe, for a guy that grew up in L.A. and New York and stuff, how influential Siskel and Ebert were to you.
I watched that show all the time. Like growing up, I saw it all the time.
Yeah.
I swear to God, I think one of my earliest memories is their PBS show, because I would watch it every week just because in the opening credits there was one shot of a TIE fighter and from Star Wars, and when I was like 3 or 4 years old, right? I just wanted to see that shot, because like it was so, you're so limited in access to media.
Sure.
And when I'm 4, right, I can't really go anyplace. I watched it forever. I'm sure, I know it was influential in me just knowing more about movies and keeping up with stuff. Although I have gone back and watched it all, and I love it that Matt Singer wrote that book. That's great, and like the fact that he's having success with it, I think is super awesome. But I've also gone back and watched some of those Siskel and Ebert shows, and I kind of feel like they're idiots. I mean, I just a lot of the things, like, I am appalled by a lot of the stuff that they say on there, and particularly Gene Siskel's unbelievably misguided ideas for improving movies, but which he'll frequently bring up. But
hilarious.
I don't think they're idiots. I'm sorry I said that, but
no, I understand.
I just sometimes their points of view on stuff are wildly misguided, especially in retrospect. But totally, I also watched like 100 of those on YouTube, so it's worth going back and watch. They're fun to see in retrospect. Also just movies you've never heard of. Like, I feel like I've heard of a lot of movies, and they you go back and watch these things, and they're like, they're spotlighting something that didn't, which I'm sure Matt Singer talked about at length, but like they're spotlighting something that that wasn't getting a lot of traction. And today it's like, what is that? I've never heard of that movie.
Totally agree. And I said this as much when I was talking to Matt last night. I can think of dozens of films that I wouldn't have seen if it weren't for sneak previews or Siskel and Ebert at the movies.
Yeah.
And My Dinner with Andre and Diner.
Sure.
And I mean, that's like, and there's two opposite ends of those kind of movies.
People sitting at table movies. Yeah. Like, those are totally different movies about people who sit at tables.
They really are.
They are. They kind of are.
And that's why I bring it up. No, absolutely, man. And foreign films and stuff. No, it was.
I gotta say, My Dinner with Andre sounds super boring. It's a pretty amazing movie and incredibly entertaining movie. I go back and watch My Dinner with Andre.
Princess Bride fans, Wallace Shawn, another brilliant performance.
Yeah,
and Louis Malle, right?
Yeah. What's that?
Louis Malle, right? Is the
I think Louis Malle made it, right? Is that right? Yeah, and Andre Gregory is the other guy.
Andre Gregory, of course.
Yeah. I used to go to, when I lived in New York, around the same damn time as I was going to that Film Noir festival. Lived above this place called the Kiev in the East Village on 7th Street, 2nd Avenue, and Wallace Shawn and Tom Noonan and what's her name from Airplane, Julie Haggerty, were all in a play across the street at the Orpheum Theater, and I'd see them in there all the time, eating lunch, because I ate lunch. I ate at the Kiev every single day, right? I mean, I was eating Ukrainian food every day, but I was just fascinated that they're actors and they're just, they're on break and they're at the Kiev. Then one time, like many years later, I was flying up to Canada for a movie and ended up sitting next to Julie Haggerty in first class. And because back then my union would pay for, there was a thing where we had to get first class if we were going out of the country. I don't believe that's the case anymore. But she was the nicest person in the world. We talked the whole way up there. And I told her about seeing her and Wallace Shawn and everything like that. And
she light up?
Yeah, she was great. Yeah, it was a great experience. And probably the fact that we were on an airplane and I never brought up Airplane was an upside to that conversation.
Outstanding. We should wrap things up on that note. I think that's fantastic. Everybody, Batman Brave and the Bold #7 features this incredible story from Gabe. It's going to be 3 parts. The next chapter comes out at the
late this month.
Late December. So, and then we're all looking forward to Below the Line.
Below the Line is what it's called.
Below the Line, everybody. Here's some great art from Gabe's upcoming film noir inspired comic strip that will be on Patreon, and we will give you details when that is up and running. And it's a good excuse to have Gabe back in a month or so, whenever the campaign begins. And in the meantime, we should probably figure out. Hi, Zeta. Hi, buddy. We should figure out a new obscure movie to talk about.
Absolutely.
Maybe one of the Sam Fuller movies. Maybe I shot.
Oh yeah.
Maybe I shot Jesse James.
I shot Jesse James. It's an interesting movie. There's a lot to talk about.
I think that's great. And again, we always try to pick movies that you. It's like our book club. Everybody, I mean, we want you to be able to watch this stuff as well and talk about it. And yeah, we may just suffer through Skidoo. We're not proud of that.
Yeah, look, we knew what we were getting into with Skidoo.
It's true. I forget what Groucho Marx thing I saw that acknowledged Skidoo recently, and I'm just like, yeah, what are you going to do? Oh, well. Thanks a lot, as always, Gabe. It's always great to talk to you. You know that.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, John.
Absolutely, man. Everybody, thanks a lot for watching. It's going to be a busy week here at Word Balloon. Tomorrow, I'm talking to Ram V during the day because Ram is in London. So we're going to do an afternoon Word Balloon live, and we'll talk about The Vigil, his wonderful new DC book, and then also his work on Detective of late. I think has been great, and some creator-owned stuff, too. Wednesday, and then Tuesday night, I'm going to be a guest on a show, and it's going to be on the Word Balloon YouTube feed, and we're going to be doing kind of a book club thing, and they're like, pick a great book of the last 20 years. And I'm like, well, how about JSA, Thy Kingdom Come, which is a great story arc in the Justice Society history. It's when the Kingdom Come Superman falls through a wormhole and winds up in our Earth. And it's a great kind of mashup, plus amazing individual stories about the younger JSA members like Damage and Citizen Steel, Commander Steel's grandson, things like that. Judo Master, the female Judo Master. So that's going to be all on Tuesday. Wednesday, I'm going to record a new conversation with Jeff Johns. So give you everybody a chance on my Patreon page to ask questions, and I'll try on social media as well. So it's going to be a full week. I hope you'll join me for this conversation and more as we continue to do Word Balloon Live through December. Until next time, everybody stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy.